probably start.
Yeah, we can start. Yeah.
Okay. Let me introduce Subodha Kumar. He is also very, very well known in our academic community. He is a distinguished professor in marketing and supply chain management at Fox at Temple University. He is interested in every aspect of operations and supply chain management that has analytics behind it. So supply chain analytics, healthcare analytics, fintech, etc., etc. Then you'll get to know Subodha, and he is going to talk about those topics in the next hour also. Okay, Subodha, you can start.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. It's always very nice to get introduced by Mike. I have always a history with Mike. I used his book when I was in my master's long back. I'll not tell the year. And I always thought, what a book, and whether I ever see this person. And I first came to do my PhD and I was introduced by my advisor, and I was very glad. And I was still always very excited whenever I see Mike. So thank you, Mike. Now, we had fantastic talks today about how to cope up with COVID situation. What are the supply chain issues? In my talk, after listening to all this, I realized we have covered a lot of interesting points, and most of the interesting points. So I'm not going to focus specifically on COVID. Rather, my goal is that, as Mike told, that I work on many different directions. And that's why some people call me very unfocused person. But I'm going to talk about how the new ideas are emerging, and I will build it based on some of my ongoing work, and what are the new problems that can emerge, mostly at the interface. And of course, some of them will be related to what is happening around us right now, but some of them is unrelated, and that was already happening. So, when I was thinking about or whenever I think about what are the new topics that is coming, I always go back and see that what are the recent trend coming. And here, I looked at Forbes who always come up with this technology trends to watch. And their most recent one I was looking at, and they talk about that what is in the hype range, which is like where we haven't seen much. But in the future we are going to see, and they define blockchain and 5G there. Then they put this AI machine learning platforms and autonomous trucking, all that in the promising. And in the higher side of the curve is we have robotics, process automation. And I can see all of this has huge research implications for operations management and supply chain, but also all the touching fields like information systems, marketing. And I'll talk about that, how we can build on some of this research. So that's what I'm going to talk today. And I have on my other screen, I have both Q&A and chat open. So feel free to write. I will actually, as we go along, I'll be happy to answer in between. We don't have to wait till the end. I will try to answer everything live here, whatever you type, but feel free to type your questions in both chat and Q&A, and I'll try to see whatever I can answer. Whatever I cannot answer, we have people like Chris and Mike, they can answer everything. So I'll always relegate to them. So when we think about healthcare specifically, where I will spend a lot of time, a lot of digital innovations going on. And even before pandemic started, a lot of pharmaceutical companies had gone towards this blockchain thing. We had companies work like Novartis and all. They have been spending a lot of money on having systems like blockchain. And there are a lot of reasons why they were spending all this money, the drug counterfeit and interoperability, security, and all those things. In fact, the companies who already had some of this in place, they certainly got advantage. And those who did not have, at least they had started, like 3M and all, they could move their supply chain very quickly because of this platform. So clearly, a lot of action was already happening in the market, especially on the technology side in the operations and supply chain. And what I have been trying to do is look at the problem from two different perspectives in these domains. One is more on the data side, where most of the work I do is on econometric, predictive, and machine learning. And another is on the modeling side. Most of the problems these days I work on, I try to understand that how I can look at the data and understand the phenomena, what is going on, and based on that, create some actionable insights. But more than that, also, can we create math models where I can take these ideas, what I got from data, and go beyond what this data says, and then create more generic models. So I think these two always go very hand to hand. And I realize, my early part of my career, I always focus more on the analytical modeling, but I noticed that something is missing there. And that missing piece was that, how do I know that this is already happening or not happening? And even if I find some result, how do I know that this is going to work? So data analytics and decision analytics, if we don't look at together, I don't think we get the complete picture. And that's what I'm going to talk mostly today around different domains. So before I get into that, there are a couple of papers I had written recently, and no more recently, talking about the interface world. And a lot of my work is on the interface, OM, operations management, information systems, healthcare, marketing. So you may want to look at that. And of course, you can find more on my website. Now, I'm going to focus on some of the topics today, and I will try to touch on different problems around these domains. I will not get into too many technical details today, but I will be more than happy if you have any questions to talk more about that later. Or you can always write to me, and you can ask here if you have any specific questions, even modeling questions or anything related to data. Feel free to ask about that as I go along. But I'll try to put the perspective of more, how are the new problems emerging in these domains, and what we can do going forward. That will be the idea here in each of these topics. And the reason why you see that I have broken down into different topics is that, since I graduated around 20 years back, my philosophy has been every 3 to 4 years, I try to write a new dissertation. And the idea there is that, how can I find new topic, as well as how can I find new methodology to work on? So I'll say that all this blockchain disruptive technology, that is my latest dissertation that I'm still working on, and I'm trying to learn on that. And I started with digital advertising. That was my PhD dissertation. So I put that at the end to a little bit talk about that. So that kind of traverses a little bit of my journey. So let's start with some of the problems in this domain. And there's no way I'm going to cover everything that is happening in this domain. My idea here is to talk about some of the problems which I think has been under-researched and is going to develop in next few years as we go along. So when you think of blockchain, one of the biggest thing that is coming right now, that how does it come into the main screen? We are hearing a lot about that, but will we see that all the companies going for blockchain, they will start using, whether it's in supply chain or whether it's in finance sector? And a lot of discussion going on around that. In fact, if anything, the pandemic has accelerated the move. I work with some of the startups in this domain, and almost all of them are getting a lot of inquiries from many different companies that how we can get into this implementation side. But one of the big questions that all these companies are asking is that, what happens to the scalability? And I think that has been a big question around that since blockchain has started, and those who work in this domain, this problem very well. So one of the papers that we have tried to look at, and looking at the scalability problem and really doing an empirical analysis is not that straightforward, because you need some kind of data to see what happened. So I found the interesting example of this SegWit, and let me talk about why this is a good setup to study that. So when you think of this Bitcoin system, again, I'm no way saying that Bitcoin is only blockchain, but that's where we have data. So that's why I have taken this example. So in Bitcoin, the senders could be either service provider or customers, and they can initiate the transaction. And when they initiate the transaction, what we see is that there are some miners involved. And I guess most of you know about it. If not, you can easily figure out what miners really do. And because of this miners process, there is some delay that happens in the process. And when the transaction is all set in stone, it goes into the blockchain. Then receiver will have some delay, and then there will be some payment which goes to miners. That's the basic. Now, in Bitcoin world, before this segued, they around a couple of years back, what they tried to do is that speed up the process, because the speed was one of the big question that was emerging. And another thing was that fee, how much fee is given. From the miners' perspective, of course, they want more money, but from the sender's perspective, they don't want to spend a lot of money. So we wanted to understand that how this fee as well as time change when they change from non-SegWit to SegWit. And what was the idea there was that for each block, they tried to put more material. So this used to be, there used to be signature inside the block. They told, what if we put signature outside that transaction, so you can fit more material in the block? And one of the reasons why they try to do it that to increase the speed, and their claim was that it will also reduce the fees. And there have been a lot of debate around that, but we hadn't seen anybody go and look at the data and really what happened. And that's where the whole discussion started. So one of the doctoral student came with the idea. Most of the work I'm going to talk about is with doctoral students or some of the young faculty who can drive a lot of good things and come with innovation. I think I'm at the age where I'm not sure whether I can get a lot of innovation come out of my brain. So the research question here we try to look at is that after SegWit, what happens to transaction fee and delay? And also we wanted to look at the participation, whether more miners are participating or not. Without miners, there is nothing in there. And we took data from 29 prominent service providers and Bitcoin, and then which covers around $1.13 trillion in our sample period. And we initially looked at all these graphs to see what happens in terms of the fee before and after implementation. And we look at who is initiating the transaction, customer or service provider. We looked at that. We also look at delay. And then we went into the empirical estimation using the DID approach. And we have tried to do, we find something very interesting, and we are trying to close it right now. But what I feel is that this has a lot of open problem for both the data side as well as modeling side. Because the whole blockchain, if we are not able to optimize properly, it will never come into mainstream world. And blockchain has potential, if not less, if not more, at least as good as what internet proposed to us in early 90s. But again, even we know that when internet came, there were a lot of concerns and a lot of things did not work out, .com bust and so on. We are going to say a similar thing with blockchain, but if we are quick enough, at least in our research community, to tackle a lot of those problems, I think we can make a very good contribution in this field. So that was first one. And I'll keep taking pause every time I go through one project and I move to the other, ask any questions, and I'll keep going otherwise. So put your questions in chat or Q&A. I'm looking at both of them as I'm going along. Now, as I told, when I work on these kind of problems, I always try to see, so what are the modeling problems? So data analytics, I work with all this data, and many of the project is where I have to combine both of them. That's where the multi-methodology papers are coming these days. But in the decision analytics side, I noticed that there are a lot of companies are adopting blockchain and a lot of companies are hesitant, even within the same domain. And sometimes they are of the same scale company and so on. So what is going on? And again, I had to find a good context where things are happening to understand what really is going on with that. So in that problem, basically, that we have recently submitted, we look at the context of online market, digital, the online advertising market. Now, as we all know, it's a big market, and even all the numbers say that it is going to grow. When I started working on digital advertising, Business Week had a big article that web advertising is dead. I believe it was around 98, 99, which was not very encouraging as a PhD student. But I'm happy that I did not abandon my project. Now as we know, the web advertising has taken over all the regular or traditional advertising, and now we are going towards more social media marketing, which I will be talking a little later. So what we do in this particular online digital advertising market, one of the biggest problem is ad fraud, and this basically ad fraud is very commonly discussed. It costs around $16 billion annually, so it's a lot of money that goes in ad fraud, and a lot of advertisers are really concerned about that. Another piece which why companies are moving towards blockchain is middleman, and the middleman takes a lot of money. One can always question, is blockchain not a middleman? Yes and no, and I'm not going to go too much detail of that, but there are some pluses and minuses that I will discuss here. But clearly, it eliminates that particular blockchain. Those are ad networks in the picture. And then the third piece, which is always a problem, is that the payments are not immediate, and sometimes it is a big problem. A lot of publishers have been complaining about that. And this particular work is with a PhD student from Tsinghua, and she has actually pulled most of this modeling aspect here. So what happens here is we try to look at all of these aspects, and there are a lot of blockchain service providers that are coming in this domain, edX and Lucidity, which is a big one. And many companies have gone towards this one of these technologies, like Toyota is using, actually they are powering their blockchain Toyota ads using Lucidity and so on. So we try to put that into the modeling perspective. And what we try to do here is that we look at advertisers and publishers. And what advertisers basically are talking here is that the positive point for advertisers is that there is no ad fraud. So, they are happy about that. So that's the positive things. But they have to pay a blockchain fee. So that's the negative side. They have one positive, one negative here. There are more things here. When we go to the detailed model, it comes. From the publisher side, there's no middleman. They get immediate payment and so on, but they have no room for manipulation. So they find it as a negative thing. That's why they do. So we put that in the game theoretic framework, and we say that how should the publisher assign the spots to blockchain? So right now they are dealing with both blockchain-based advertisers and traditional advertisers. That's what is happening right now. So they have to decide on how to do balance. And of course, another issue is the adoption of blockchain, which advertisers should adopt, which we should not adopt. And as I told, I'll not get into technical details, but I'll be more than happy to answer. So here in this blockchain, trying to see both from the perspective of how we can make it more scalable, what does the data tells us, and what kind of different solutions we can come, and how the adoption as well as uses are going to change based on different parameters as we go along on that. Okay. So any questions till now? Good. Okay. So I'll continue. Another area which I think, again, that touches on healthcare, but I'll not be talking specifically on the COVID-related thing, but I've been working with some of the healthcare companies who are in the domain of AI, machine learning, and deep learning. And these companies basically are trying to find solutions which can, by using some of these advanced technologies to predict some of the problem as well as find appropriate solutions. This mostly I work through my center at Temple University, work with multiple of these companies. So one of the projects that we recently completed was on thermal image classification. So what we do in this one is that diabetic foot is a big problem right now, and so medical cost is very high. And the reason is that you don't detect the problem at the right time. And even if you detect, you don't know what is the right solution and so on. So what we have tried to do here is that we collect a lot of data about that. And, we are using applied analytics. So we take the whole a bunch of things that we all teach in our classrooms. And we take all these images. So we have our device through which we take all these images. And then based on these images, we do different image analytics. And the idea is that once you do that, and then we apply hierarchical clustering as well as all the deep learning methods there. And based on that, we are trying to do different kind of things. One is that, how do we identify that which are really the patient here using this thermal image analysis. We also look at how to assess the different kind of features that will identify this kind of disease, and then proactive food care. That is the idea. We have already implemented this. We are experimenting with some hospitals are using this device, and we have some grants pending on that. And I plan to write, but for the research perspective, I think we have a lot of potential out there. One is more from the design science perspective. How can we design this kind of system? And another is from the optimization perspective, how we can optimize these things. So I feel that, this is one area where a lot of new research problems are going to come. And for PhD students, I think it's a gold mine to look into. But for anybody, we can work on a lot of problems. Now, the continuation of that project, we are also looking at PPG and EEG data. And I'm talking about PPG here, but we are also looking at EEG data. So we are looking at both pulse data as well as brain waves data to see how we can utilize that to do different kind of prediction. And again, we are using all different methods, and we look at all this analysis. The idea is that can we do early prediction of diseases and all this early detection of cardiopathy and so on, and supervision of cardiac patient. Again, we have implemented part of that already, but we are working more on that. And this leads to a lot of research problems, again, especially the brainwave one. Those who work on this area, you may want to look at Temple University has a very large database of EEG, and that is used in many healthcare research. But it has a lot of potential for operations management as well as information systems researcher. So it leads to a lot of open problems that we can solve in coming years. And it is not just related to one or two, I can tell you, once we can discuss a lot on the optimization side. So, any questions till now? I'm good. Don't hesitate in asking questions. Just keep going. And then some more problem on the disruptive technology. I'll not go into too much detail, but we have a lot of work right now going on in this shared economy. I'll not get too much detail into that. Another area which I think for operations management and supply chain is very important is industrial IoT-based platforms. I think this is going to be a big area where companies are deciding, like Boeing and many other large manufacturers, Toyota, Honda, they are trying to create their own industrial IoT-based platform for maintenance service market. And I think that is going to lead to a lot of interesting problems, both on data analytics sides and decision analytics side. And then another area, which is cybersecurity, which I know I've talked to Chris many times about that. I think cybersecurity and Industrial 4.0 that leads to a lot of interesting ideas. And finally, I have some work on subscription models and all, and how that is changing with the new technology. So yeah, again, I will change gears here and go to another domain. As I told, I'll cover different domains. But before I go to healthcare, which we have been talking a lot, although as I told, my healthcare, I will not be discussing a lot on the COVID side. I'll just touch on that. It will be more generic. Again, any questions, comments at this point? Yeah. I hope we all are connected. I've not lost you. So keep giving me some hints so that I know that I'm still connected here. No, that's the problem with Zoom, as before starting that in Zoom, we always have to be, the interaction part always goes down. So. Good. Mike, we are here, right? You're connected? So everybody's with me. Now, let me talk about the healthcare. Now, in healthcare, actually, I started working on healthcare problems mostly around 10 years or so back. And when I moved to Texas A&M, we always, there we had a big setup. Before moving to Temple, I was at Texas A&M for 8 years. And some of these people in business school and engineering had a big grant on this healthcare. And that's when I realized that, a lot of interesting problems that has come. I will not talk about some of my early projects on that, but more recent one, I have been working on one dimension of my healthcare work was around online portals. And I think that is coming everywhere. The very first project, what we really did was that we worked with one of the online healthcare portals in India, and we tried to see which is more like a Uber of doctor-patient market. And we look at, what kind of features are going to work in these portals, because the healthcare portals are very different from any other marketplace. There, people are going there to get advice, and they may even want to go there to book an appointment and so on. So we had a natural experiment here, and we looked at different features. We tried to see how the positive reviews can improve the online reputation, and how does it impact the quality of suggestions that come, and finally the overall performance of those advice. So that's what we try to look at. And we have used classic econometric models here to do that. And when I was working on this problem, and we published it a couple of years back, I realized that this problem is very different if you go to different parts of the world. Like in the US, this is very different, online healthcare portals. If you go to China, it's very different. So the follow-up paper that we have, we submitted a lot of these works. I submit to ISR, but because they are more. But I can tell you, this is equally important for operations. So this is like I cannot decide whether it's more IS work or more operations work. So we have taken this again from the 2 online healthcare portals in China, and we have tried to see what is the interaction between online portals and offline, and how it is evolving. Okay, so that's what we have tried to look here. And the area which I actually started working was with healthcare information exchange, which I think is another very important phenomena for both operations and IS community. Now, what is the healthcare information exchange? Those who don't work in this area, don't get confused with healthcare insurance exchange. I'm not talking about that. This healthcare information exchange, which are referred to as HIEs, they basically, right now, a lot of healthcare data is dispersed. And with your healthcare, you might have even seen, they say that, well, we have joined this HIE. Are you okay sharing data or not? So how it really works is that you basically, what you see here is that if all of these parties are part of the same HIE, then the data will store. Let's say you go to one place, your data is still stored in this particular hospital, but any of this other entity can pull the data if you have given permission to do that, and if they are part of the same HIE. So that is the whole idea. In last decade, a lot of push have been there to move healthcare providers to go towards this HIE. And there have been some reports as well as white papers talking about different kind of benefits, that it reduce length of stay, it reduce prices, utilization, and one of the healthcare paper talks about the potential savings of around $80 billion. And there are a lot of stimulus fund that came into place into that. But the research question side, these are all proposed benefits. Are these benefits really there? That was the biggest question that I think is out there, and what are the extent of these benefits? So we started working with one of the largest HIE in New York State, which was NY Health. Now they have merged with another one. So we started collaborating with them. In fact, one of my former doctoral student who was in Binghamton earlier, he got this connection, and we started working with them. But at the same time, in Texas, we were working with 3 healthcare information exchanges who were part of this grant I was talking earlier. And we looked at all of them, data we used from NY Health for this project. And our idea was to look at what is the length of stay, readmission, and doctor-nurse utilization. And we again use multivariate analysis for that. And using that, and we look at many different factors here, like what is the prior interaction between focal patient and attending doctor, the breadth of patient and doctor's HIE experience, and so on. And the idea here was to understand that how these different factors get impacted, and we had a battery of controls and all. Again, I'll not get into details of that, but I'll be more than happy to answer any question. Now, when I was working on these problems, I realized that there are a lot of optimization problems that come out of these things. And those optimization problems mostly comes from the sustainability side. So how can this healthcare information exchanges be sustainable? That was the question that we were asking. And for that, we worked on two projects. First one was more, we took a simplistic approach, more stylistic game theoretic model. I'll not even call it stylistic, but a game theoretic model. Second one was more on the math programming model, which we went more OR route. And the idea was to understand, how do we know whether HI should be established, where the government money should go? And we look at the cost of maintaining this healthcare providers, which is SP. And this basically axis, without going into too many technical details, as x-axis increases, the heterogeneity among the different healthcare providers decrease, which means that you are focusing on more concentrated set of healthcare providers. That was the idea here. So what we try to find is that when HI cannot be financially established. So this is when we say cannot be established, because of financial reasons. There is not enough incentive to do that. Unless government fully fund them and keep doing that. That is not going to happen. So we tried to see that. And there was another very interesting paper coming out of University of Maryland on, this was a work done with in collaboration with CMS, I believe, in what are the different value-added services that can be added in HI so that they can sustain. And the list of things they prescribe. It was written by Ritu Agrawal and some of the her colleagues at University of Maryland, and it was very nice report talking about different things that can be done in that domain. So we pick onto that and we try to model it, which one to offer, what will be the price and how it will impact. And we find something very interesting. So take the same graph as earlier, but if you start giving value-added services, then there is a reason where HI might be established, and we again find more detailed result. Participation may increase in some region and some other. So that is the idea here. There is a question here from Nomita that decision is based on the CESA. So decision analytics come under data analytics, then coming as a separate branch. See, we always have a debate of that. But how we define data analytics, at least even the master's program and many of these courses which are done, that you try to understand what your data tells you. Of course, if I just understand what data is telling me, that is really at the end of the day does not give me much value. In some cases, yes, it can, but just understanding that is not of much use. So most of the data analysis, Nomita, essentially lead to some kind of decision analytics. Now, decision analytics is many times not that straightforward. So I understand that when I do more advertising, the sales will have a non-linear curve. But that does not tell me, and it could be more complicated. I can have a variety of different advertising techniques, and that can have a different sales curve. Then how do I find the optimal mix of that? That basically comes into decision analytics. Now, there have been different definitions of that. The idea here, what I'm trying to see is the data analytics ones are trying to understand the phenomena using this data, what is going on, and then using that data to somehow optimize the process. I hope I answered your question, Nomita. You can always ask a follow-up question on that. That is the idea here. And I will not just do it for healthcare, for all of them. That's why I try to define. But sometimes it is more complicated. Some of the actually research I will talk about where I had to combine that. Okay. Now, there are a lot of interesting extensions, and that's what I think is more interesting, and I want to talk more about that, is that where do this research go? I think healthcare information exchanges are still have a lot of open problems. First of all, I talked about this, what are the different value-added services? So in this paper, we look at supplier discount program, where if you join this HIE, you also get discount on other items, for example, on your paper product, on your healthcare devices. So how can you design that? Another thing that we are looking is that what is the impact on lab test orders? That's another very interesting idea that you can do. So that is about HIE. I'll stop on HIE here, but a lot of open problems right now. There have been some early works on HIE on adoption as well as optimization from both operations and IS researchers, some even from marketing researchers, but I think there are a lot of open problems out there. Another area which is very close to my heart, and I started working on that, how we can use all this design science approach using optimization techniques. That's what I learned during a PhD, and to apply to create more individualized treatment plans. And this also was in collaboration with some hospitals, and we tried to create the personalized treatment plan for breast cancer patients. And what we really show here is that using certain kind of data, you can create a system where you can create optimal doses for the patient. Again, and it's not really IS research, it's equally important for OM. I will say it's more operation than IS, but I don't believe in those boundaries or lines. That's why I pick my journals based on wherever my co-authors sometimes like. As I told, most of my co-authors I'm presenting here are either PhD students or young researchers. Another area, which I'll not go too much detail, this is actually in the context of China. In China, very common that the doctors get the monetary gifts. And there have been some ethical questions around that. That is it a good idea to give this kind of gift? So I'm working on that as well. Then one area in healthcare for operational perspective, I think is very important to understand all this performance-based payment and so on. And there was very nice special issue in EMSOM, I believe around 2017, 2018. It must be around Chris's time, which covered a lot of interesting problems in there. But they also led to a lot of open problems. In fact, all those papers led to a lot of open problems. And then POM also had a special issue that also gave a lot of interesting ideas and a lot of open problems. So I picked on a lot of that. And this one was based on CMS data. We look at that. This is more recently, I saw that Vikram was talking in the morning. This was in collaboration with Vikram Tiwari from Vanderbilt. We looked at some of the field research. Finally, I work on some policy papers. I'll not get too much into that here because I want to spend a few minutes on talking about a couple more things. But I can stop here and take questions. I'm happy to do that, or I can keep going on one or two more topics. Any questions? Mike, you have anything?
Any questions? Well, let's see if they mention questions. Otherwise, you could go. You still have some. You still have 10 minutes.
Okay, so I will keep going. And as I told, I don't have to finish all my slides. You know, I always keep some backup in case I go very slow, very fast, and I have no questions. But feel free to ask questions. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Another area which actually overlaps with what I have talked till now, disruptive technologies and healthcare, is social media. Now, I have already touched some of the problems I told come into the domain of social media, and I didn't know how to basically break them. So I've just done this more arbitrarily. But social media, I think, brings a lot of interesting problems again, new research ideas. And I started working on this 5-6 years back, I'll say. And again, I had some papers in 2015-16, but more recent ones was this one. We worked on data from Yelp. Actually, we collaborated with Yelp on that. And Yelp had added a feature in 2009 where businesses can go and respond to the comments of the reviewers. That, well, you did not like my food, I'm sorry about that, I can do. Now, many platforms are adopting that kind of feature. And we wanted to see that what is the impact of that. That was one of the earliest papers. But then I found something very interesting, is that why don't all these platforms put all the spam reviews as marked? Now, Yelp does that. Some of the other platforms don't do that explicitly. So these two papers are my latest interest, where I go into machine learning models and do that, thanks to my good co-authors who taught me how to run this. In fact, it was very interesting. A couple of weeks back, my dean put me up for one hour presentation and told, give some hands-on how you will run these models. I was not ready for that, but no, luckily I have learned something in the past few years of running those Python codes and all. But these two papers are just on applying those machine learning tools and see how you can identify fake reviewers using feature engineering. Now, when I was working, again, as I told, I always get excited that can I create some models around that to go broader. So one of the papers that I'm working again with another doctoral student from Tsinghua University is that we are trying to see why these companies don't do enough for detecting fake reviews. And there have been a lot of discussion around that. The fake reviews is a problem, but these algorithms are not enough. And I can tell you a lot of articles here, but they are also talking then that companies like Amazon or Alibaba, they're not doing enough to fix this problem. And why? Reason maybe they just need it. So we tried to model in this one, and this one was presented in ICIS conference last year. In fact, got this paper in the track, and now we are revising it for management science. We are looking here is then how this sellers can decide when to manipulate and how much control platform does actually strategically. So we find that sometimes platform may deliberately not put their best algorithms to detect these ones because it works in their favor. And that's what we try to model here. And we have found this using data actually. Our data clearly shows that companies like Amazon can do a lot better, but sometimes they don't deliver. So that was more on the review side. Another direction I'm working right now is on human brands, which is a big field right now because social media marketing is becoming now bigger than web advertising, and it is going to surpass very soon. And human brands play a huge role, and human brands could include celebrities, or it could be somebody who is not that big celebrity as known, but it may be known in smaller community. So what we tried to do in the very first paper, and I was looking for a very good context for human brand, and I ended up doing with the election. And because in election, and this is Indian election, which is different from US election, those who don't know, in Indian election, you have different candidates who run, and the leader of that party will become the head of the country, not one person runs. So that gave us a very good context. And the idea was that how does the sentiment of the tweet affect the engagement of human brand? And what is the spillover effect? The spillover effect between, in this case, was a human brand and party, but it applies to any company. You can think of a company has two different brands, like Volkswagen has problem with one of their brand, but what will be their social media strategy for their other brands? They try to dissociate, or they help other brand to make use of that. And then we extracted around 23 million tweets. I was surprised that there's so many people, actually, all these tweets were coming from candidates and parties. And we then did a lot of sentiment methodology. This where, all the interface of our work can go with AI machine learning, but then combined with the econometric models. And one of the questions people ask, I work on this whole machine learning AI thing, can I publish this in top journals? We are almost ready there, but you have to give good insights, and you have to combine with something else. We are not a computer science journal yet. So I think these papers are getting published with a little bit more effort than what will go in a computer science journal. And then we took this idea, and we, as I have been doing for many others, we took this data and then I saw that you have clear optimization problem, no doubt about that. You have to optimize whom to pick to advertise your product. So we did a classic problem there with the math programming, and this human brand is a big thing right now. So this Ronaldo got $1 billion deal for social media marketing, and he just had to go and write on social media for certain period. It's a lot of money going on there. And what we do really is that, and we look at that, on average, this influencer marketers are making more money than many of the professors. So, it's a good business to get into right now. And I'm really thinking of switching. I don't know whether I can be an influencer or not. And then we take how you will hire these influencers. We collected a lot. So this is a multi-methodology paper. We see that different influencers can reach to the same set of users sometimes, or you can have different users, and there is a retweet. And then we create a math model based on this, all the reach and all. And then that's a risk. I'll take a question. Lian is asking, fake reviews. If the fake reviews goes to product, then all sellers selling the same product will positively or negatively affect, unless the product is being sold by only one supplier. So you're right. You know, the fake reviews many times is done not by the seller. Actually, sometimes it is done by the even manufacturer of the product, right? But what many times this fake reviews also go for the seller perspective as well. So you can model it in different ways, Lian. It depends on the context. You're right. If it is just for the product, then all sellers will get advantage. But many times it is not for that. And by seller, you may also think of manufacturer, right? So one of the manufacturer is creating a fake reviews, then how does it impact other manufacturers? That's the idea. But you're right. It will depend on the context of that. Another area in social media, and I know that I have 5 more minutes, so I'll stop, and I'm taking questions as we go along, and you can ask more. Is in Twitter now you can hashtag your, you can trademark your hashtags, and some companies are doing that, which is against the whole idea of Twitter or social media that you should not block it, right? But there was a reason, like because McDonald's hashtag was hacked and so on. So several companies are trademarking their hashtag, and we are trying to look at what is the impact of that on engagement. And then I look at another phenomena which is becoming very big, especially in China and many other parts of the world, is social pricing, where they say that if you share this code with your friends in next 30 minutes, then your current purchase will have 10% discount and so on. So this one, we collaborated with a company, with one of the largest online retailers in China, and we try to see what different kind of social pricing you can do and so on. And finally, in this domain, I started working with a company in Philadelphia on HR analytics. And what happens here is that they have an app. It's a very big company. It's called Develop Me right now. The name is disclosed in the paper. And in the real time, you can give review to your boss, your subordinates, your peers, everybody. And we are trying to see what is the impact of that. Many companies are adopting this real-time feedback rather than waiting till the end of the year. So we have run many experiments with them. The first one we published, others are under the revision, but we continue running. In fact, Informs picked the first one as their media thing. So they have sent out to a lot of media. So Chris was talking about all this media, we're getting a lot of it. So my co-authors, and I was very happy about that. But this is one area where I think a lot of work will come in next few years. And then I have some more, actually. I'll stop here. I'm not going to talk about this project here. I'm going to stop here. I had some on omnichannel retailing as well, but I think let me take 2 more questions. Okay. Somebody's asking what is blockchain. Well, it will take me at least 3-4 hours to go on that. I teach a whole course on blockchain. But in a couple of minutes, if I have to explain, the idea of blockchain is not entirely new. It has a different pieces which existed, but the whole thing together, I don't think we had that. So the basic idea of blockchain is that you collect data which stores securely somewhere so that nobody can alter it, and data comes directly from the source. And very simple example in supply chain will be, let's say you get a meat product. You don't know how the meat was processed, what all happened with the meat. I'm very interested in knowing. I don't want to know it's organic or not. Organic is a very brand. I want exact details. Blockchain is facilitating that. It will take all the data from the source and anybody can see. So for example, in pharmacy, you get this medicine and it says that it has to be kept at certain temperature. Now you don't know whether they kept it at that temperature or not before you got it. You have no way to know. You just get it, this painkiller, and you eat it, right? You have no idea whether it's good or bad. So blockchain can track all those things, and it is done through sensors, so nobody can alter it. And in blockchain, even the person who entered the data cannot change the data. There are ways to create new blocks, but nobody can go and edit it. Is it hackable? Of course, anything is hackable, but it's very, very hard to do that. That is the basic idea of blockchain. And of course, as I told, many supply chain problems will emerge, in my opinion, of blockchain in next few years. So we are going to see a plenty of both data analytics and decision analytics. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? Mike, I'm out of my
Yeah,
time, right?
it's exactly on the, so I suppose that anybody who has more questions should email you.
Yes, yes.
And
Please feel free to do that. Please send me any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer. As I didn't go into technical details, but you can find many of these papers, working papers. I'll be more than happy to share. But really great to be talking about that. And anybody, any questions, I'll be more than happy.
okay, thanks very, very much for a great talk.